honestly, it's not like we've had a ton of baseball movies in the last decade or so. We went through our phase in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. We had a lot of baseball movies. But this is certainly considered one of the new baseball movie classics. But I had never seen it mainly because a part of it was timing, but also it didn't have the majesty of baseball. It wasn't like romanticizing the sport as a lot of other baseball movies. At least that was my impression.
Oh, okay.
That was my impression. I saw this more as a nuts and bolts. Hey, we're going to tell the story about Billy Beane and Moneyball. And so it kind of hit me in such a way where it's like, well, is that really going to be an interesting story? So that's main reasons why I didn't really have a desire to go see it. It's not like I didn't want to see it ever, but I just didn't have like a desire. And so the opportunity never came up. Well, lo and behold, we have the movie club. Saw it. It's like, you know what? This is a good time to pick Moneyball. So I picked Moneyball. Real quick synopsis. It's the story of Billy Beane, who developed the new age of analytics, kind of adopting from the old Bill James baseball encyclopedia, and just a different way of looking at players. The Oakland A's are a low market, small market franchise, RIP Oakland A's, but can't afford, to keep up with the Yankees. How are they going to do it? And so this pretty much tells the story of that first year of Billy Beane trying to rebuild the athletics roster in a different sense. And so it becomes the new age versus the old age, and it tells the story there. So there's your brief synopsis. Of course, it stars Brad Pitt in the central role. And I didn't realize this at the time, Kent, but the Jonah Hill character is not an actual person. It's more like, and we get this a lot in biographical movies, where it becomes either a representation or an amalgamation of several different people who kind of worked alongside the main character, but it helped kind of forward the story along by consolidating a lot of traits into one person.
Yeah, you can kind of tell it's a way to be able to use one character to, like you said, just basically funnel a lot of information through that one person and be like, okay, we're going to take these 18 different trades, these 18 different stories that happened that are, minimal in the grand scheme, but important in this moment, into this guy, and we're just going to send it off.
It also helped prevent the nuts and bolts from the story becoming just like a nuts and bolts pure analytic thing. It added character, literally and figuratively.
So what did you think, Ken, of that? And then, of course, Jonah Hill is the one who's in that role.
Interestingly enough, the previous movie that Jonah Hill did before this was called Get Him to the Greek.
Oh, yeah.
The comedy. And he was here doing a promotion for that movie in 2010 after they had completed filming of this, which came out in 2011. And so I interviewed him and ended up talking to him about a movie that I'd never seen, which was this one. And he said that the interesting things to me, first interesting thing is this showed he can actually act, right? There's not a comedic part at all. But what he was saying was that character was exactly what you're talking about. Yes. And that he was there to basically provide all the how do you say it? The ins and outs and context for what Brad Pitt was being credited for, right? And so you didn't have to put Brad Pitt's character through that, right? And he said, so he had to actually study up on this stuff and on baseball, because he said he really wasn't a big baseball fan. He didn't know who any of these names were or anything.
Yeah.
So he had to study up on this, study up on the analytics, and then go in and try to act against movie star Brad Pitt. Which
I actually thought, one of the best parts of Moneyball is in similar type of frame of movies. If you think of it in the same way that they have kind of like The Big Short and like financial movies and that sort of stuff, or like not necessarily The Wolf of Wall Street, but like Wall Street, like those sort of things where things can go over your head quickly. This is about minutia, baseball statistics, and different stuff. And if you don't understand baseball, I think you can still get this movie because they do such a good job of being able to explain it in general, but also give you the idea of like the emotional impact of the statistics of what they're looking for and the analysis and what they're going into. And they do it in such a good way that it feels like common language, the way they speak about it, despite it being in hyper-focused baseball terms.
I'd agree with that. The other thing that I liked about this movie is that I do a top 10 and then 10 more every year. It was in my 10 more of the year 2011. So I liked it since it came out. But what I really liked about it, again, seeing it this time again, was two things. Number one, it's not full of baseball footage, because that's really not what the movie's about. I mean, it's baseball, but it's not about the games. That's number one. And I thought that was great for multiple reasons, including you don't have to have actors trying to act like they're athletes. So we've talked about that before. Most of the time it didn't work. The second thing is it stuck to the truth and didn't turn into a cliche. The A's don't win it all.
Right. They still end up losing in the divisional round and never get to the championship series.
Yep.
But as I noted in 2011, that may not have worked for the A's that year, but the Red Sox stole it. And what was it? 2 years later, 3 years,
2 years later,
won the World Series.
And they acknowledged it, at the end, with the little slate at the end saying, yeah, the Red Sox who tried to hire Billy Beane away, and he decided, no, I'm gonna stick it out here in Oakland. Then they literally took Billy Beane's formula, as a lot of teams now have, and have adopted it to, a winning strategy. The storyline of Billy Beane and his background, because Billy Beane was a high prospect at one time with the Mets organization, but it never panned out. Tying the whole, the scouts thought this of him, and then it didn't work for him, and how that motivated Billy Beane to not be that person to overinflate a kid's or a prospect's, potential, because, just because, hey, seat of my pants, this is what I see in you. Instead, looking at it more analytically, what did you think about weaving that in and out of the storyline to kind of give us an idea? Because we know why Billy Beane is motivated to do it from a financial standpoint, because he's basically backed into a corner. But why he believes in the philosophy from an emotional standpoint, do you think that was an important storytelling technique?
Oh, absolutely. You had to have that, and you also had to have the stuff about his daughter, the personal life, whatever you want to put it, because otherwise it's boring. Okay? It might be interesting for a while, but then that process is going to get boring. But you bring in this personal element, or whatever you want to call it, that really help, as you say, it's a storytelling technique. It pushes that other story along from a personal perspective rather than a analytical, this is my job kind of thought. And it also it lets your actors act, I guess would be a way to say that, right? It lets them create a character, right? If you don't have that, it kind of works against him becoming anything more than like a cipher, so to speak. And the other thing that I think is really important to note here is that Brad Pitt, Mr. Handsome movie star, doesn't come off as, he comes off as kind of this everyday guy, right? Who's doing not as, this isn't and I thought he was quite good. I thought Philip Seymour Hoffman is great as the manager, right? the late great Philip Seymour Hoffman. I mean, you can hear a manager doing that, right? You can
Absolutely.
you just hear it, just not this week in the surveys on the NBA guys just going off on how much they hate analytics, how they think a lot of
Right.
ruined the game. Same exact complaint, only delivered by this great actor, or I thought he was a great actor, and the daughter, whose name has completely escaped me, I thought was very good as well.
Trying to find.
Is that Sharon? Or am I thinking of somebody else?
I'm looking here, trying to find out. No.
Or the actress name?
Yeah.
What was her name? I'm looking at the cast listing and I can't find it for some reason. But going back real quick to
Karis Dorsey.
Hoffman. Okay, there you go. And this is me more being a baseball purist. I didn't no problem with the way that Philip Seymour Hoffman played a baseball manager, but and I don't know why I get hung up on this. He looked nothing like Art Howe.
Yeah,
I mean, Art Howe was more of a chiseled, a bigger guy. Philip Seymour Hoffman was kind of playing a stereotypical, the old baseball manager with the big beer belly and stuff. Yep. So that I had a small hang up with that, but I didn't mind it because, Hoffman did what he was supposed to do, and that is he's supposed to be the guy that's opposing this strategy from a baseball purist standpoint. And so I didn't have an issue with that side of it.
I also do love Moneyball and the fact that you can look back at it now, and it has been long enough that a lot of these side characters have become huge movie stars in different sense. When I go back and I watch it, obviously Philip Seymour Hoffman has passed, but it's almost every time that the first scene you see him in, you're like, is that Philip Seymour Hoffman? Because you never expect to see him in a baseball uniform. And you're like, oh, there he is. And then Chris Pratt in this movie, every time that I watch it, I always forget that it's Chris Pratt until he does that dumb first base question. And he's just like, oh, well, it's not that bad, right? And they're like, no, it's incredibly difficult. That's one of the best parts of the entire movie.
Yeah. I think the other thing that is interesting about this movie is that it got passed on from director to director to director. There were 4 or 5 directors that were attached to it, including Spielberg at one point and Steven Soderbergh and whatever. And it ended up with the Brenton Miller, I believe his name is, Brenton Miller. Well, he had made this movie Capote just before this, which is a really, really Philip Seymour Hoffman again, really good drama. When I saw he was attached to it, it's like, how can this guy make a movie about sports, right? Because it just struck me that was not his kind of thing, not knowing that it ended up being a perfect movie for him to shoot, which is about this kind of very narrow aspect that doesn't have anything to do really with the athleticism.
This could have been a very, very different movie. You were talking about all the different directors. Sony originally had the rights to it until they put it on the shelf. And there was a chance, and we just got done talking about Philip Seymour Hoffman. Art Howe was scheduled to play himself.
Really? Oh, really?
Scott Hatterberg and David Justice were scheduled to play themselves because they had since retired. And so the movie could have, and of course with Soderbergh, being the director, it probably would have taken a very different tact. It could have been a very different looking movie telling the exact same story had it gone through under its original or one of its original plans. And I wonder if that would have maybe taken away a little bit from the film to have so many of these people playing themselves versus how we ended up getting it. Because sure, David Justice, was a critical, Scott Hatterberg was a critical character, but they really weren't critical characters. They were kind of almost like parts of the set. They were like, hey, here's, these people were important, but the real story here is focused on Billy being in the fight to get this whole plan to go through. And so I wonder if that would have worked as well if you would have had some of the actual guys showing up in the film as themselves.
And the other issue with that, I agree with what your kind of point there. The other issue with that is if they can't act, it takes you out of the movie so fast.
It rails it, yeah.
Mhm. I love most of this movie. I like the idea of getting a ragtag group of guys together and taking on everybody else, and it works out. I love that kind of story. That's one of my favorite storytelling techniques or measures. I think the acting is really good. I like that even though it's not a comedy, like obviously the actors are very good at the comedic timing. That being said, every time I watch this movie that I love a lot, I always get hung up on Billy Bean's daughter because she is playing a song that the movie sets up as a song that she had written, when really the song is The Show by Linka. This song came out in 2008. This movie takes place in 2002. The movie was filmed in 2010. Why? Why did they do that? Why couldn't they find like a Sheryl Crow song or a song from 2002 for her to play? Why couldn't they just write her an original song? It wouldn't matter. If it was bad, it was bad, but who cares? A child wrote it. But if it was good, they also could have used that for marketing if they wanted to. Why did they pick The Show by Linka? Is it just because it's called The Show? Because people call baseball The Show? It bugs me
because of the
to
lyrical
no end.
content. That's why it's the deeper message and meaning, Nick. You have to suspend your mind a little bit. It's
Man,
a movie.
Nick,
come on.
I probably should have seen this coming, but I was genuinely curious what was it that Nick didn't like about this. But the fact that it's such a narrow little thing about music.
Yeah.
And that literally happens at the end of the movie.
Now makes all the sense.
Final blackout scene where they put text on the screen. That's what Nick is hung up on.
That isn't it. She does it throughout the whole movie. She does it throughout the entire movie. But the thing that bothered, like, I'm not like a super purist. Like, I prefer, if a movie is set in a certain time period, I prefer that music in that movie is from that time period. But if you can make it work with songs that haven't come out yet, then sure. Or that wouldn't have come out yet in that time period. Sure, that's fine. But the way it was set up in this movie specifically just irks me every single time.
The famous songs of that time, would you have rather had her end the movie with Complicated by Avril Lavigne?
Yeah, that could have worked.
Dilemma by Nelly? Or Chad Kroger's Hero? Would you have preferred those instead?
Hero already, that was Spider-Man already. And I love that
Lord
song.
forbid we put a different song into your 2002 movie, our bad.
I'm just saying, I don't understand why they picked a song from 2008 in a movie that takes place in 2002 but was filmed in 2010.
Here, I just got done saying, Philip Seymour Hoffman looks nothing like Art Howe, but it didn't really bother me that much. And now Nick's going deep in the wood on a song that maybe 5 people recognize.
She could have played "Soak Up the Sun" by Sheryl Crow. It would have been great. That would have worked.
Would have added a full star for Nick. I'll add this, Nick. You hit a little bit of a point there, a little point that I want to get back to at the beginning of your argument.
Okay.
There is a version of this movie in an alternate universe that is a pure comedy. It's Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill, and they are like the Oakland A's, and like they're just going around and they just stumble upon analytics, and it's a humorous way to tell this story. But they chose to do the more serious version, and I wouldn't be opposed to seeing the fully, curious version of this one, because even if you think about like even the scenes where he's like storming down into the tunnels and stuff, and Art is standing around every single which way, and he's going to cut a player, and Art's like, "How about my contract?" Like you can see these like semblance of scenes that are comedic in value if they do it a little bit differently or time it a little bit differently. There's a version of that would work, but I'm glad that it ended up the way that it did.
This movie is also so quotable. It is such a quotable movie. Yes. I love that. So, like, the Yankees are paying you $3.5 million to play against them. That's great. If I point, you talk. If I point, you don't talk.
Part of where those quotes come from, right? Is Aaron Sorkin came in and did the final rewrite on it, and some of that is pure Aaron Sorkin. Some of that kind of dialogue you're talking about.
Fantastic.
It's just pure Aaron Sorkin. I have no idea, John. Did you look and see where was this thing? Was this actually filmed in that crap hole of the Oakland County Coliseum?
Moneyball was primarily shot at 2 stadiums, Dodger Stadium and the Oakland Coliseum.
Yeah.
They also included Fenway Park, of course, Blair Field in Long Beach, California, and most scenes were filmed in downtown LA and Santa Monica.
Okay.
Yeah, it would have been hard. I mean, when he comes out on the field, I mean, because they weren't using a lot of CG back then, I don't think. So yeah, it definitely looked like a lot of it was shot in the old crap Coliseum, as you call it. I don't know if the locker room. I don't know if that's the actual locker
That was
room.
kind of what I was wondering, because that locker room looked like it belonged in that place.
Mhm.
Let's just put
Yes.
it this way. I don't know if any of you guys ever at that stadium.
I have never been to the Coliseum.
No.
You know, I've been there for A's games and for Raiders games, and not good.
I thought so. Really quick, I thought it was interesting the way they filmed some scenes. Like, there's a scene when Chris Pratt is pitching, and they just kind of make it all dark around him, so they didn't have to try to simulate the game that was happening or set it up exactly right, because people would like nitpick it, and I'm sure it saved money. I thought that was a really good way, because it really made you feel like you were kind of in the head of that character, but B, I'm sure it saved him money.
I don't think you'd be too intimidated by the Chris Pratt fastball from those scenes. What do you think, John? Doesn't really look like a pitcher.
Definitely not.